Neighbor who finds this deer tied up isn't ready for what happens when cops arrive. The neighbor had no idea that what he was about to encounter in the backyard of the under-construction house would leave him with no choice but to call the cops. The officer arrived, and what happened next was not what he had expected. The whole situation took a bizarre turn. Typically, animal rescues are full of intense moments, but this was something bizarre. One wrong move and someone can be seriously injured. From time to time, rescue services such as the police or firefighters are called in to rescue a cat that climbed a little too high up of a tree and won't come down. Officer Kevin Zisheng of Fulshire, Texas, received a call, but it was about something a little stranger. The person who had called 911 had a very interesting tale to share. One Texas household was surprised to see something strange on their property. Why were they so stunned by the encounter, and who was there? He immediately informed the authorities that there was a deer restrained behind the home that was under construction. An officer responded with a deer, in a panic, but by the time Officer Kevin Zisheng arrived, the caller had already cut the rope and the buck was free to go. All in a day's work, yes, but the interesting part is what happened at the unexpected encounter after the rescue departed the officer. Many things can go wrong for those attempting to save an animal while it is in trouble. Despite the threat, a Fulshire, Texas man nonetheless took action when he saw a deer tethered to a tree outside a neighbor's house. He entered the backyard of a house that was being built as soon as he saw the animal in difficulty and called the authorities, who helped save the poor animal. However, that's when things took a bizarre twist. Officer John Zisheng eventually showed up on the scene and began looking for evidence as part of the follow-up procedure. Who would have imprisoned this poor creature? After combining the property for a few minutes, they realized something strange. Despite being freed, the footage revealed he hadn't scurried into the woods as one might expect. Rather, when the police officer arrived, he had simply moved towards the back door and found a few pieces of nylon rope still dangling from his antlers. Officer Zisheng, with his police body camera still rolling, removed the last shred of the rope from the deer's antlers. They were hoping soon after the release, the deer to flee, but that isn't exactly what happened. In fact, the deer eventually came up to Zisheng and requested a back of the ear scratch. Naturally, the officer did not want the deer to be in the area where he had just been tied to a tree. He told the news, "I tried to scare him to make him run back into the woods, but he wasn't going. He genuinely wanted to stay out with us." As the officer made their way back to their cruisers out front, the deer followed them, and soon Officer Zisheng shouted he's not scared at all, as the deer stared at him at the front lawn. He thought that the deer must have really wanted to show his gratitude. With the deer's safety in mind, the officer eventually pursued him back into the woods, which was exactly behind the house. Even though he definitely would have liked to get along with a deer, it's rarely a good idea to let a wild animal get too comfortable with humans. But still, the story was not over yet, and something more was waiting on his way. Officer Zisheng described the encounter to the media 2 days later and said he had never seen a deer so friendly. He had no idea what the reporter had pointed out in the woods. "Sir, is that him over there?" he questioned. Officer Zisheng was taken aback when he turned around and saw the deer was indeed watching the interview. "But why and how did he return back?" "He came back to see me," said Officer Zisheng, as the deer stood over to him once more. The officer was taken by surprise at how affectionate this sweet wild animal was. Then he decided to name the animal and his new friend Uncle Buck. However, despite all the heartwarming sessions, the cop was still worried about the safety of the deer. What if whoever had tied up in the first place would find him back? Uncle Buck, however, was not new to the area. For weeks, he had been approaching the neighborhood kids. After already giving Uncle Buck his freedom, authorities called the Texas Parks and Wildlife, who determined that the deer was eligible for relocation. As of today, Uncle Buck is living peacefully in an animal sanctuary far from anyone who would do him harm. It's tragic to consider that the deer's generosity might have contributed to his capture.